Welcome. My name is Bill Reimer from the Regent College Bookstore, and it's my pleasure to have as a guest today Karen Stiller. Karen is a writer, a very good writer, and is the senior editor of the periodical Faith Today out of Ottawa, I believe, and she lives in Ottawa. We'll give Karen a chance later to describe a little bit more Faith Today and its role in Christian community across Canada and beyond, I'm sure. But welcome, Karen. And
Thank you, Bill.
Karen is very good to see you again. Karen is no stranger to the Regent community, having served as a registrar back in the early 90s when her husband Brent was a student at Regent and serving as an intern in a local church here in Vancouver, as I recall.
Yes, and it was admissions officer.
Admissions officer.
Yes, but I was working very closely to the registrar. I was bothering the registrar all the time.
All right. But I do have warm memories of you, and you're a friendly person, and Brent, who was always sort of easygoing, he would breeze into the store and
spend our money.
But but good fond memories from those days. In the early years of my time at Regent, I arrived in '89. So it takes you back.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, welcome. And
thank you.
Your new book is a very good book. I very much enjoyed it and went right through it in a couple of sittings, and very much carried me along. And I congratulate you.
Thank you, Bill.
For a book that arrived right in the middle of COVID, May 3rd or so, that was a bit of a hurdle, but nonetheless, it seems to have got some traction. And I did read a very good Publishers Weekly review of it. I hope that it got a red star. It should have, but my copy is still out there somewhere in storage where our mail is. And but I have read it online, and so I would like to flag that.
Thank you.
There, but it's entitled "The Minister's Wife: A Memoir of Faith, Doubt, Friendship, Loneliness, Forgiveness, and More." And that follows the themes in the book, and it's a warm book of recollection, humor, and insight, spiritual insight as to how God has worked in your life over the journey, and doesn't serve up easy inspirational answers. This book, you might, with the title, it might by default be placed into some inspirational church section, but it's a book much broader than that. It's I'm guessing you would call it a spiritual memoir, and it fits within that. And I think we'll put it into the spirituality section, although if we have extra copies, we can also put it in the church section as well. But it's much more than and the title, I think, is very deliberate, and subtitle. So it's but it's not. It doesn't fit a cookie cutter image of the minister's wife type book, I would say, in the beginning.
Thank you.
Karen, you describe faith sometimes as a tiny bird that comes to the window and then flies off. We have right up here, you can't see them, but we have hummingbirds that come in and fight regularly up there, but they're in and off, many times as we speak here. But tell me about how that image fits into your particular journey.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I think what I've seen over, the stretch of years in ministry, for example, is that we have these deep, wonderful times. I mean, I guess we sometimes call them the mountaintop times, but so much of our faith life is lived in the valley, or just the ordinary, actually. And it can be hard to sometimes recapture those wonderful, warm, exciting feelings or whatever it is. And so I've really come to learn that my feelings don't change what is true. I think that's something foundational upon which I stand. And so maybe it's more that the heights and depths of faith come and go, but the ordinary walk of faith day in and day out is something that is steady, but we can have doubts. I mean, I have a chapter on doubt. When I wrote the bulk of the book, I was actually doing a Master of Fine Art in creative nonfiction at University of King's College in Halifax, a very secular setting. And at one point, one of my writing faculty mentors said to me, at some point, Karen, you're going to have to explain to the reader how you can believe this stuff. That was how he phrased it, which I kind of loved, because it was just super honest and direct. And I realized that for me, it was best to capture really writing about my faith within a chapter on doubt, because it's just been the reality. And my experience in the church has been, when we don't talk openly about that, that we actually lose people, and people need to be free to speak their questions and admit their doubt. And so, I think that's what I meant by the little bird.
Great image. I like that. Doubt, and you mentioned doubt. You call it somewhere, doubt is faith's most faithful companion. And
yeah.
That I've particularly in my younger years have struggled deeply with doubt. I think the biblical books that come to mind for this kind of faith journey are perhaps Job and Habakkuk and biblical books like that recount the story of the faith of an individual and the struggle to believe in the midst of it.
Yes, absolutely. And, I remember our years at Regent College. For me, they were such warmth, such growth, such community, such support, such fellowship, really the likes of which we have experienced, but few and far between, since leaving. Those are special years. And I think I learned there how important it is, to have companions on the faith journey, people with whom you can be really honest, obviously, and share your doubts and your wonderful times as well. And so I learned that at Regent, and I longed for that since. And when I find it, I hold on to it and I cherish it.
Very good. Yeah. So what are the most challenging parts of being a pastor's wife?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it has always been loneliness, for sure. And I think this comes back to the yearning we have for real community and people with whom we can be completely vulnerable and transparent. And sometimes for clergy, that is not necessarily the people that you are surrounded by the most. And so I think that feeling of sometimes it's not expectations. I don't think people have expectations now on, clergy families, like maybe they did in previous generations. No
Right.
one really believes I'm going to play the piano, or, they would beg me not to. But I think there are assumptions that are made
Sure.
about, who I am in my walk with God. Or again, we talked about doubt. Maybe the assumption would be that I wouldn't be a person with doubt. Or that I'm like a stand-in, for Brent, or if that I would have a theological grasp of things that would enable me to explain things at the women's Bible study in a way that, really I couldn't possibly. So all of that adds to loneliness, actually. Like there's a bridge between people's assumptions and how alone you might feel as a clergy wife. So I think, and I know there's lots of pastors' spouses who are men, of course, I know that. But I have talked to enough of them to come to believe that it's actually a slightly different experience. And I think there is something about being the wife of a minister that just has another layer to it for whatever reason. That's been my belief and experience, at least. So yeah, I think being lonely, and the answer to that has been finding community, and of course my relationship with God, keeping that, trying to keep the bird on the windowsill to milk that metaphor to death. But I have sought out friendships with other ministers' wives. I talk about that in the book, how, and I've seen this when I meet someone who's married to a minister and they find out I am, they very quickly will be like, can you have coffee with me? Or do you want to be my friend? Like, you talk to each other like you would back in primary school or something, because there's just this understanding that we know something about each other's lives, and probably we can build some kind of companionship that will be important to both of us. So, yeah.
So the most challenging bit might be the need to feel that you have to be a certain place in your Christian walk in order to fulfill the function, combined with the loneliness and
because I
times doubt. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. For me, that's been my experience. I think like, my first and biggest answer is loneliness, but those other elements play into that. And I will say, and I really, this is important to me to say, that I haven't had, like, people have terrible stories of their experience in the church, and I don't have those. Like, we've been in wonderful churches. I love the church, and that was one of the reasons that my publisher, who's Tyndale House, was actually one of the first things they said to me. As you talk, as you do, as you're inching toward publishing, that they appreciated my book because it's clear I love the church, and I do. And so that's super important. And I know there are some clergy wives out there, for example, again, clergy wives who have been really hurt, and I haven't been. Maybe I think too much. So yeah.
Have you read the novel Dearly Beloved?
I have.
Yeah.
I have.
There's a different setting, of course.
Yeah. I gobbled it up because, there's so little out there. Like, that's part of it. To be a literary character in a novel as a minister's wife is, and, in a modern-ish setting. Brent,
that was a book by a woman by the name of Kara Wall, who grew up in a historic Presbyterian church in New York. And I read the review in, I might have seen in Publishers Weekly, maybe the New York Times review. And it, there were some aspects of it that didn't seem entirely real, but I thought it did carry the story. It set in the 50s and 60s, late
Yes.
40s maybe for the most part. So I have memories from that era. So I did take me back there, and I thought it was a good story, and makes But anyway, that was
I
an
agree.
aside.
I agree. I mean, as soon as I read about it, I ordered it and I sat down and read it immediately. And I think, I think there are great, it did remind me that this is great material.
Yeah,
Someone
no,
could write some really great fiction around this life, that is not sort of sweet and sugar coated all the time. And that's one thing I like a lot about that book. She showed some of the struggles for sure.
What are the most satisfying aspects of being? You probably touched on them a little bit. So
no, you know what, Bill? I love that question. I think it is a privilege to be kind of welcomed in pretty quickly, usually, to the lives of people, often when they're experiencing difficult times. And but there's a real privilege there to be able to walk alongside a family or a person who's hurting or lost something or just puzzled about how life is unfolding, and be a special kind of friend to them. And so in the prologue of my book, I tell this little story about Brent and I being away on a vacation, and we're hanging out and we're friends, as you become friends quickly, whatever, hanging out with people at a resort. There's two couples, and when they finally find out what Brent does for a living, which happens sort of halfway through the week, one couple just closes down and they want nothing more to do with us. But the other couple opens up and warms up and wants to talk about big, important things. And I think that is really cool. So just as people finding out that you're in the ministry can just slam doors shut, other times they just spring open, and you actually get to skip a lot of the small talk, for lack of a better word, and go dive deep really quickly. So that's pretty cool. And I would say the church being part of a serving, when it's at its best, a serving, giving community within a community, within your city, within your town, being able to love your neighborhood in an organized way sometimes is also really good. Like I've met people around, like through the years, for example, if we've done mission trips, back when we could do that sort of thing. Brent always made room on the team for people who didn't even necessarily go to our church sometimes, but wanted to be part of this action of love. And I remember at one point thinking, it's the church does cool stuff and we get to be a part of that. So there's been lots of great things. I mean, pancake dinners, potlucks, Bible study groups, choir practice, all that stuff. It's just this wonderful family. And of course, seeing how God works through his people from the front row has been a real privilege.
Knowing what you know now, what would be your advice to your younger self on starting out? And this can serve other.
Yes, that is such a good question.
Pastor.
I would warn myself about what Sunday morning is going to be like before you get to church. I would say, Kieran, decide what you're going to wear on Friday and figure that out. I would, and I'm thinking back to our years with young children. Probably we have three adult children now, but Sundays were like crazy, chaotic, yelling, crying experiences of running in late and staying too long and all that stuff. So I would, so that's sort of, superficial answer, but there's something deeper
Hmm.
there, that church will not be the same for you as it will be for other people. And
Hmm.
church, going to church even is, for me, not, I think, been the same for maybe the person who's sitting beside me in the pew. I'm watching often my husband preach.
Hmm.
Um, I'm
Hmm.
very aware of things going wrong, maybe.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
sometimes too much thinking I'm picking up on the mood of the people, like if he preaches too long or his joke falls flat or whatever, like I'm like, eh. And I'm an editor on top of that, even worse, poor guy. So I think I would warn myself that church will
Hmm.
not be the same, and therefore, do things. I wish I had done things more quickly in my life, like find a spiritual director, which I now finally did, and make sure I'm part of a Bible study or something with people who understand, which I now have. And making friends with other clergy couples, like that's something we experienced at Regent too, was just, again, that community. And we still have some of those friendships, which are precious. But in every city or place we've lived in, um, pretty much we have found another ministry couple to kind of hang with. And I think I
Hmm.
would tell myself to make sure you do that pretty quickly, because it really helps.
Oh, very, very wise. Huh. You and Brent have a window on suffering that very. It's hard to imagine other couples in our culture who would have more than a pastoral couple
Mm-hmm.
would have. Just because people don't belong in the same way to communities and organizations, they do in looser ways, perhaps on average, not everyone, of course, but folk who are part of a church body share each other's suffering in a way that a lot of other that folk don't have in culture. And I don't want to
Yeah.
overgeneralize, but
Yeah. No, I
there
hear you.
is a larger community across generations and different types of folk too that wouldn't normally congregate. I it's just I'm thinking that, and
Yeah.
would you agree
Yeah,
with
I
that?
do.
Yeah,
I do think that. I think,
yeah,
and I completely resonate with your hesitation as you say that, because we all know that, people who don't go to church are still, leading rich, connected lives. So
yeah,
I know exactly what you're saying,
yeah,
I think.
yeah, yeah.
But the church is still so, of course, so unique, and we know
Yeah.
why. I mean, we're worshiping
Right.
God and following
Yeah.
Jesus, and being His body on earth and all that stuff. So I I think you're right. Like, the church is a
Yeah.
beautiful community, and I'll tell you one thing. I really, because there is, you use the word spiritual memoir, and that's exactly how I describe my book. That's what I think it is. But sometimes, when I've been reading some works over the years, I have felt like there's too much about being broken, that word broken, and not enough about we're
Mm.
actually moving forward also. We're,
Mm.
we're
Mm.
being made holy. And I remember J.I.
Yeah.
Packer,
Yeah.
talking about that. Like, we're
Huh.
actually supposed to be holy.
Uh-huh.
And we get so caught up in everything we are not, that
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes we forget
Uh,
what we are that is good and right.
uh,
And I think
uh,
that's been part of my almost revaluing of the church as a community, and as a body and a presence, and all of that. Like, for example, the word religious and religion sort of fell out of favor, and I've
yeah.
actually, in my life, I've started to reclaim that, the word.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
That's
am a
good.
very religious
Yeah.
person, and
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
okay, saying that, and
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
okay, having that being connected to the church, which we all know the
Uh, yeah.
imperfections, of
Yeah.
course. anyway, you were talking about suffering, and I think that to meet the people who have survived so much and forgiven so much and lost so much, and of course I think about people who've lost children. I mean, I can't imagine any worse pain, and still were carried through that time often by the loving and warm embrace of the church community, understanding that some people have had terrible experiences with the church. I know that, but that the church provided, a warm blanket to wrap around them, in their coldest, worst moment, is just really beautiful. And to be able to view that time and time again, over the years, that's what makes me love the church too. Like, just the power of that community is so special and rare.
Thank you. Yeah, that very wise again. You use a quote of Bonhoeffer along the way. There is something like, there is the obligation of listening, and translated phrase, of course, but yeah, I thought that good in the context of church and family, of course.
Yes.
And something we become conscious of, I think, as we get older, just how inadequate, at least for me, I have been at listening over the course. But very, very something to think about and meditate on, I think, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, if there's sort of one thing I think that I have, as a minister's wife, learned, is that people desire to be listened to. And I don't think that they're experiencing that in a lot of places. And I think, so I noticed fairly early on, and in the book, when I use that quote, it's after I have failed, big at listening to someone who, to be fair, talked too much. Like, that's sort of the setup in the book, where I experienced this very long drive with a woman in our church who just didn't stop talking the whole time. And I felt like deeply impatient. And so that would be an example of a time where my role put me in a position where I was called to be kinder than I really felt. And the gap between what I knew I maybe should be and what I knew I really was provided an opportunity to go, oh, what's wrong with me? And what's really happening here? And where's my heart? And so, having said all that, I think people want to share their stories and they want to be heard. And the minister's wife can provide a pretty reliable place where they're not going to get their head bit off. And someone who will listen. And so, I wouldn't, obviously I haven't always found that easy, but if we can listen to each other's stories, that's a huge gift we can give each other. And I will say, let me say, in terms of writing process, in case it's of interest, I tell that story in the book. And then I did my due diligence with the book, where I don't name that person who talked too much, but I sent her the chapter and I said, remember that drive? And, can you read this? And I'd like to know it was okay with you that I tell this story. And she was so wonderful and gave me permission, and I think was kind of amused by it. So it was kind of fun.
Yeah, it's interesting how the Spirit so often in our lives uses these moments of being a little put out with a person to take us on in the relationship, and it can that relationship with the person can change over time, and we even have a reverse view of ourselves as too sometimes in that, and that's
it's true.
It's a part of life. Among other things in along the way. There is this little platoon called the family. And even when I tuned into your book launch, it was heartwarming to see, to after a while figure out, the person who is interviewing you is your daughter. And
Yes.
that said so much to me. And
Yeah.
we take these little lives into our arms when they arrive, and we don't know whether we're adequate to the task. We drive home very, very slowly and cautiously, and don't really know what we're doing. But it is a journey, and there may be points where our children disappear into a black hole. It seems from our standpoint, and then reemerge and have all those gratifying moments now as adults. And I was thinking of that with seeing your daughter there with you on that day. But
Thank you.
anyway.
Yeah, that was beautiful for me, and made the sort of necessity of launching a book online so much easier to be honest, to know that she would do that with me. But yeah, the whole I have a chapter in the book about family, and I open it by talking about Brent giving me a puppy, as a gift for saying thank you for putting up with him in seminary, which of course was at Regent. And I talk, you may find this funny. I talk about him in Hebrew class because he really struggled with biblical languages during his MDiv. And I tell this story just very briefly about him telling someone in his class to shut up because she talked too much, and that this student then gave him the finger. And so this is just a little side story in the book. So as I worked through the editing and rewriting, of course, my editor at one point said to me, that's not a good story. Like, she was concerned about that story in the book, that one student would tell another one to shut up and that the other one would give him the finger. And so,
in Hebrew class.
Yeah, in Hebrew class in seminary. And so we talked about it back and forth, and I realized nothing would be lost in the book if I took that out, if she really, really felt strongly but I was able to talk her, sort of down from that position. And then as I did, I realized actually this is important to me, because what I am sort of showing through this little anecdote is that, they are real people. Pastors are real people. And if that's not at the heart of this book, then that starts to matter. So, we ended up coming to agreement, and it was better that we had that tussle. And that's the role of an editor, right? To wrestle out the writer. And then hopefully at the end, the book or whatever is better. So I was thankful that she raised her concerns, but it was also interesting to me that, these priests and pastors and preachers were women and men in seminary who are just real people, and that's really important.
Yeah, for sure. You tell the truth in this.
I don't know if Dave Ewart saw that exchange, though.
Oh, okay. He would have been okay.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I for a while I was a TA while I was studying at across the street at UBC. I was a TA for a bit, and with students and tutorials, you were always looking for a thesis. Where's the thesis in this? And I think at one point I found one. Not that there needed to be a formal thesis or anything like that, but what do you think was the thesis?
That is an excellent question. I remember at one point, actually, during the writing of this book, again, when I was in this master's program, they were always pushing us to what is this about? What is this about? And one night I woke up in the middle of the night and with this like revelation, I'm like, that's what my book's about. And then I thought I should write that down. And then I thought, no, I'll remember. And then to this day, I don't remember. So I will say that I think The Minister's Wife is about our struggle to live honestly in a world that is difficult. And it's about being vulnerable and transparent before, first of all, God, who loves us and envelops us in grace, and then before our community, who will not be maybe quite as, but still communicates the love of Christ to us. So,
yeah, I wrote down a passage along those lines, and I may have, I may have misquoted slightly. I don't know if it's verbatim, but in church we arrive broken, and then we are put back together, like beautiful vases fallen off a high shelf. To be broken and to know it means you are aware of who you really are in your deepest and darkest places. I think that's
thank you.
I think that's basically what you said.
Yeah.
There, I had another little spot. Church rubs up against each other in my annoying self, grating, and then it goes from there. I haven't, but there's also a velvety, but I think it's the story of what God accomplishes in His people through the body of Christ. And
thank you. I think so.
You basically said that when you responded. So I think we're on. But and not that there has to be any thesis, but I think that what I just read is at the very heart of the book.
Thank you. This morning I will, because the book's been out since May 5th, I am starting to hear, back from people who've read it, and
very good.
And I from ministers' wives, I am getting, and I'm not, and I would never in a million years presume that every minister's wife will love my book, that's for sure. But what I'm hearing back is things like, I see myself and I hear myself, for the first time in something I'm reading. And so that's been really special. And then actually just this morning, I got a text from a woman who's not a minister's wife, and actually a Catholic friend of mine. And she basically said, I'm enjoying your book. It'll take me a long time to read it. And then she said, but I don't care because I like myself more and more as I read it. And I was just like for a writer, I don't know, I just felt so humbled by that and grateful that she's actually seeing herself. She's seeing herself. And that's what the value of telling the truth is. And that's the gift we give each other when we're willing to admit, sort of who we really are and who we're becoming. And it's just a special thing when that happens. And it happens all the time in conversations, right? With good friends, when we take our guard down, or when we're the first person in the room to admit, I don't get this. And then all of a sudden 8 other people say the same thing. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, thank you. No, that was great. I think I'll make a little shift to Canada now. When I was growing up in Oshawa in elementary school, the kids I went to school with, I didn't know anyone who didn't go to church or synagogue. It was just a given. And even we were Baptists, and we were a little different yet again from the average, kid that goes to the Presbyterian church down the street. But so there was a consciousness of being somewhat of a minority. But today there's a sea change, and you've lived in Nova Scotia, BC, Saskatchewan, and
Yep.
in Ontario now in two places. You've had quite a slice of Canadian life and culture across time, and it's quite a and now, of course, as senior editor at Faith Today, you can give a little something on that. But any reflections on that experience and Canada as a country? Not that you can generalize, but there's a change. Some of it you wouldn't want to go back to, but in other ways, it was more a country that was more faith filled. You never say that a country is Christian, but in a certain way. But there has been a big change, and
Yes,
any anything come to mind that we could talk all day, but
absolutely. Like I think I've definitely experienced and viewed, like in the church at least, that the challenge to the church to survive and thrive, as statistically most Canadians don't go to church and the throngs of people leaving the church. So that is the cultural mood right now, for sure. When I think back to the last couple of years, let's say writing this book again in the secular program, it was interesting to me because I was meeting people who did have, for sure, preconceived ideas about the church. But I also met people who had never stepped foot in a church and had no bad feelings at all. And were just curious, like, tell me more about that. And it struck me, like in some cases, like I had a piece in the Walrus magazine in the early days of writing this book about being a minister's wife. And the editor of the Walrus, which is a Canadian magazine, of course, she basically, I had a chance to pitch to her. So I was pitching some ideas that she wasn't at all interested in. And then she's like, well, what else are you writing about? And I said, well, I'm a minister's wife. And she's like, oh, that's interesting. And it was interesting to her. I think I was probably the first minister's wife, her first minister's wife. And so what I took from that was that to think that everybody is like antagonistic or negative toward us is actually not true and not helpful, of course. And that actually there is a genuine curiosity, like my professor who said, you got to tell me why you could possibly believe what you believe. Like, that's like skeptical, but it's also a question, and I've been, with part of my work, I have sort of been a moderator, I guess they call it, at through Wycliffe College and the University of Toronto, with big kind of dialogues. I don't think we would ever debate, but between atheists and theologians and so on. And those things are packed. They fill Convocation Hall at U of T, and they live stream them all around. And there's, again, I'm not sensing hostility, I'm sensing curiosity. And to me, that's really interesting. So I almost wonder, this is completely unscientific, if like 10 or 15 years ago, it may have been more like, church. But now it may be more like, I've never heard of you. Like a chance to just introduce ourselves and be confident in who we are. And then, of course, there's, like we have such a wonderful, vibrant faith community of immigrant Christians in Canada who are enlivening the church and, giving some churches a second chance at life, which is so good and wonderful. And so, I'm quite hopeful, I'm quite
Huh.
hopeful, actually.
You're now in a historic church building. My wife and I often, well, when our kids were studying in England, we were we had the occasion to visit them in England, and it's quite amazing the church buildings that are around still, and many of them being put to new uses and good uses by churches and reaching out, whether with cafes or concerts. And that there is an opportunity, I think. There's nothing wrong with renting the church gym or
Mm-hmm.
renting facilities and rearranging things every week. But there is a place for the historic church building with a group of believers meeting in it, and there is an opportunity, I think, there, and you probably, sounds like, recognize that, and you've been
Absolutely.
part of
Yeah.
a certain turf for since 1885 or whatever it is, and it's yeah, yeah. But,
Yeah, I think that's right. I like our church in downtown Ottawa. We have, a fair number of university students and younger families and couples who are walking that, liturgical path. They love the liturgy. They want stained glass windows. They don't mind sitting on a pew. So I remember back at Regent reading the book Evangelicals on the Canterbury Trail, of course, the Robert Webber book that has been so formative to so many people. And we've seen that over the years, like just the love of what might on the surface seem traditional and institutional and not hip and not cool, but has such deep rootedness and such beauty, and such a appreciation of the arts. And anyway, there's so many, of course, different flavors of church, and but yeah, I agree, there's something about that place, both physically and spiritually, that place that can be quite a comfort to people, I think.
Oh, thank you. We'll wind down soon here, but what's your journey as a writer? When did you know you wanted to be a writer? And most people who want to be a writer never become a writer. And then how did you know that you'd arrived? It may have been a while ago now, because you served as a writer, journalist for a good number of years now. But just tell us a little bit about
it's funny, I was thinking about that in relation to Regent the other day, thinking, was I thinking writing back then? And because I was actually in a little writers group that back then with some other, I think, people who worked at Regent and spouses of students, but I don't think I was thinking of myself in that way. So it was actually a case of we were living in northern Saskatchewan, Brent's first kind of permanent placement, and I realized I need, I was very naive. I thought, I'm going to become a writer to make, I'm going to bring in some income here, which no one told me that wasn't likely or possible. So I approached this small town newspaper, and therefore, like, advice I always give beginning writers is write small and write what's right in front of you, and then just build up. And that's what I did. So I went from writing for this small town newspaper to being editor of the Sask Anglican newspaper. And then from there, actually, John Stott came to town to this event in the Diocese of Saskatchewan where we were. And I had a chance to interview John Stott. He was my first interview, if you can believe it. And then,
the place to start.
Yes, right. Start. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I was so intimidated. But anyway, but that piece got me into my work into a national newspaper, I think. And then they called back. So it was just a slow build up over years. And then just finding my niche and realizing, this is a good work, and it feels like it matters, and it's something I can do when my kids, around my kids. So in some ways I say my kids made me a writer, because I was wanting to be in the home with them, but I want it to also work. And so because I wrote during nap times, and I became pretty fast and so on. So yeah, I just built it up. I went back to school at different times. I did a year-long night school communications program at Tyndale in Toronto when they offered that. And I just started building that freelance vocational writer picture, and eventually took a position at Faith Today, and I co-edit Faith Today with my colleague Bill Flederis. So we have a nice partnership with that. And so yeah, I've written journalistically over the years, and I've almost always within the Canadian church press world. And so that's been really wonderful for me.
And while you're mentioning that, I'll encourage whoever's listening to look up Faith Today and subscribe. And it's these journals and institutions that serve a very important role in the church across the country. Very much need our support at all times, I'm sure. And so yes. I would encourage you to do that.
Well, and I've really enjoyed having, we've really been pulling in some Regent faculty over the last few years, writing pieces and essays. Sure, and that's been really fun for me to kind of bridge back to that beloved Regent community.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, the book arrived right in the middle of COVID, as I mentioned before. What's your how's your standpoint changing? Your field of vision changing at church or writing wise? It's probably stretching you in new ways.
Yes.
And
yeah, it's really, I just hosted a webinar yesterday with my workplace about churches responding to, as we kind of reopen, and there was debate about that word, reopen, because of course, we haven't shut. But yeah, I think it's so challenging for so many people. For me as a writer, I've been, the biggest change for me has been having more people in my office, with everybody working from home and at home. So that's been a thing, but we've worked that out. It'll be really interesting to see what the next number of months hold for the church. And, I don't think it's going to be easy, but there's so much opportunity too. And I'm sure everyone's churches have done this thing where, we have people calling each other, and, younger members taking care of the needs of older members when they can. And so I'm hoping, like everybody, that we'll emerge out of this, stronger than ever. And in terms of my, writing, I've actually been able to write. I'm a writer who doesn't, I wish I was a writer who sat down and wrote because I was so inspired to do it, but I tend to write on command for reward. So when people tell me what to write, I write, and then, I'm done, and that feels good. So I've been writing. My publisher, Tyndale House, has been having me write some, essays and pieces around this challenging time from my perspective as a minister's wife, to kind of support the book as one does. And that's been interesting. And I've actually enjoyed it, that opportunity. So yeah, I don't know. The whole world is disappointed, I think. And I hope it's just an interesting time to connect with each other. And I really hope our communities, whatever they are, including the streets we live on, will be friendlier and kinder when this is over.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, very well done. A good book. Can you hold it up for us?
Oh yeah, I do. I haven't.
in the midst of this COVID, I have an electronic copy. It's not
Yes.
my normal way of reading, but
Me neither.
there is the book, and
Yes, thank you.
I recommend it. And you can't go wrong there, regardless of your age or what you do for a living or whether you're retired. I would recommend it. It is a gift, and as you can tell, Karen is a gift, an exemplar for many, and humble at the same time. And but thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Bill.
You can buy the book at your local bookstore. Support your bookstore in these times, and if you wish, you can go onto our site. We have a fulfillment service in the U.S. at the moment. We're closed. It's called Aereo, Aerio. And if you put in Regent Aereo, it should come up, and you should be able to search for something. They ship from the U.S., so the shipping is more expensive in Canada, but you can order it that way. But there are other ways as well, and particularly your local independent bookstore is a good place to do that. But thank you, Karen. This has been
Thank you, Bill.
very good. Good
Well,
to see you after so many years.
it's so good to see you too. And I used to every break I'm sure I had during when I was admissions officer, I would come wander through the bookstore. So I loved it. And I bought books. Probably too many. No, you can never buy too many books.
Carry a few with you still, hopefully.
Absolutely.
We shed them along the way, of course.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill.
And greetings to Brent.
I will do that. Yeah.
But thank you, and hope to see you again before too long, perhaps with a new book one of these years. And
yeah,
we'll
maybe.
Most happy to support it. But
thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Bill.